All eyes are on England, which today is ending lockdown. This lockdown started back in January and has slowly been eased in stages every couple of months. But this marks the final end of it. No more size restrictions on weddings. Nightclubs are reopening. I even had to look up what they meant because I'm so used to there being asterisks and buts attached to these reopenings. You know, something to put a dampener on good news. And there sort of is this time around as well. While the government has ended all of its restrictions, companies can still enforce their own policies. For instance, one shop might require that you still wear a mask, while the one next door to it won't. And various train and flight companies are still enforcing masks as well. You can see from this picture here that Audi is no longer requiring masks to be worn. But when I visited it today, everybody still was, which made me proud of my city. It's not like anybody enjoys wearing them, but when you're so powerless to deal with something like a pandemic, wearing a mask is a way of feeling like you're doing something to help. And seeing other people wearing them reassures me that we're not all selfish, spiteful creatures, no matter what it may feel like on the internet sometimes. And the end of mask wearing has made it easier to deal with seeing people not wearing them as well. When they were mandatory, I got angry when I saw people who thought the rule didn't apply to them. But now it's like, hey, that's their choice. So when will I stop wearing mine? I intend to stop wearing one eventually, but right now I do still feel a little cautious. And like I said, a mask feels like I'm doing at least something to help. I'll definitely wear a mask until I get my second vaccine, plus then maybe a few weeks on top, because if I get COVID, I'll want to know that I did everything I could to help myself and to prevent others from getting it. So I think it all depends on what happens with COVID now. It's a scary time in England. We've been vaccinating since the start of the year. Something like 90% of adults have had one dose of the vaccine and 2/3 have had their second. That's a lot of people, and yet the cases keep rising. It's horrifying to see the daily cases growing this quickly. My city has never had as many cases as it does right now, and it's growing every day. You can hear it as well. You can hear people coughing from your window. There will be somebody in Aldi who's coughing. You'll walk past somebody who will then just open their mouth and cough. It might not be COVID. It's just, with current case levels this high, you kind of assume it is. And I'm sure this wasn't what we were expecting when the vaccine rollout started. I am confident that the goal in the first place was to vaccinate enough people to reach herd immunity, at which point cases would begin dropping down and down and down forever. We saw vaccines as being a way of controlling the virus's spread. And I know this because I've been doing these videos every month. I can literally look back to older ones to see what we were thinking about it a year ago. And it's become painfully obvious that, since the start of this year, I've had to temper my expectations time and time again. Right now it sounds like the vaccines do a good job of preventing deaths, which is obviously the most important thing, but it seems like you can still get the disease, even after having had 1 or even 2 doses of a vaccine. Now this is when people are quick to bring up the argument that vaccines aren't 100% effective, but that's missing the point here. It sounds like even if they are working as intended, they don't prevent you from getting and from spreading the disease. It's just that your symptoms should be milder and should be over more quickly. In other words, people did expect the vaccine to slow the spread, but then the Delta variant grew at the same pace as the vaccines could be rolled out, so their effects cancelled each other out, only with fewer deaths than before because vaccines are still better at stopping serious cases. We now seem to accept that we could fall ill even if the vaccines have successfully given us a degree of immunity. It's important that I document stuff like this, because many people seem to gloss over this fact, or to deflect in some way. It'll start with something like, yeah, but. No but. I'm not trying to undermine the importance of vaccines, I just want to be clear on where we currently stand about them. I just want us to acknowledge that the plan has changed. I guess that's important to me because this series serves as evidence of what my thoughts about the disease were every step of the way. Other people can freely change their minds and probably don't even know they're doing it, but for me, this series has made me painfully aware of every time the goalposts have been moved. Before finalising this video, I posted on Twitter with some of the questions I currently have about it. I expected a confused barrage of responses, but it remained impressively calm and constructive. It seems like my thoughts on this matter are in line with how most people think at the moment, and that the things I'm still unsure about happen to be things that do appear to be at least partly unknown at this given point in time. So it's nice to know that I'm currently unsure about the right things. If only every conversation online could be so helpful. The quality of YouTube's comment section greatly depends on the video in question. Some are entirely spammed by unnamed accounts accusing Bill Gates of doing evil stuff, though I've got to say, for the most part, I've been pleasantly surprised by how civil it's been on my videos. Most of the comments are anecdotal stories and dank memes. Well done for being a constructive community, people. Fun fact, I also upload my content to Odyssey, which prides itself in being a video platform that anybody can upload anything to. Unfortunately, right now this means it's home to all the people who aren't welcome on YouTube anymore. And I've got to say, the difference to the quality of conversation is interesting to say the least. Reddit is in agreement about the big stuff, like that vaccines are a good thing, but it still seems divided on smaller aspects of the disease. Which I kind of like. A site containing thousands of people should house many different views and attitudes. And if one part of a site holds one belief and another holds a different one, there is a beautiful opportunity for both to learn from each other. Like that ever happens in practice though. But as an example, the general consensus over on the Coronavirus UK subreddit is that vaccinated people can still get the disease, but that it should be mild. I suspect there is this belief there because the cases are skyrocketing in this country despite so many people having had the vaccine. However, the main coronavirus subreddit holds on to the belief that the majority of vaccinated people will not get the disease because the vaccines should prevent it. Possibly because people from this subreddit are from all sorts of countries, all in different stages of their vaccine rollout perhaps. One of these beliefs has to be wrong, or there has to be something else to it that isn't being discussed. So what I do is to post being all like, well hang on a minute, you're saying one thing but these people over there are saying another, based on this information. What do you think of that? Obviously this is immediately seen as an attack, or as me trying to start an argument, but I'm not. I just want answers, and I'm not getting them. It's such a radically polarised issue that you're immediately seen as being one extreme or the other, and rather than answering questions, all people do is to try and dismiss what you say and to belittle your character. If I had to condense down my current questions, they would be: 1. Having all had the vaccine, how many members of my family are expected to develop symptoms of COVID? 2. How would this have been different were it not for the Delta variant? 3. Is the Delta variant more easily spread in general, or is it specifically better at infecting people with some level of immunity? Or are these two things part of the same thing? 4. Does getting the disease and getting the vaccine result in different levels of immunity? And in both cases, what are the chances of reinfection at a later date? For instance, if I'm vaccinated, then I get the disease with mild symptoms, will this mean that I'm now impervious to later infections from it? And lastly, number 5, can we please get detailed stats on the people being hospitalised from this, and how many of them were vaccinated? And I don't want people trying to answer these things just for the sake of it. I want good answers to these things if they exist, and if these things are unknown, then I'll be happy just knowing that as well. Amusingly, of all the places to get information from, the best I've received so far was over on Odyssey. I think he was warning me not to take the vaccine because more vaccinated people die of it than unvaccinated people, which obviously you'd expect if the vast majority of vulnerable people have been vaccinated. But the journal he sent provided these lovely, simple, understandable boxes of information stating the vaccine's effectiveness at preventing symptoms and deaths against the Alpha and Delta variant. It even showed whether a second dose had been taken or not. Wow, this is how it's done, people. This is how you detail figures in a simple and understandable format. In fact, this all seemed too good to be true, so I went to the source and it hasn't been peer reviewed yet or anything like that. And they are of course limited to their sample sizes and so on, so I'm still tempering my expectations. But please, this is what I want to see more of. This is the sort of stuff that everybody needs to see. Let's have more of this sort of research carried out, on larger scales, and peer reviewed, and then shared through news outlets, instead of me having to find out about it from a link on Odyssey. I'll link to it in this video's description so you can see it for yourself. I've changed as a person. I've got better at being busy doing nothing. The lockdowns have removed some options for me, so I've relied more heavily on the activities that remain. At the start, I think this did me a whole lot of good. I took up new hobbies and I had a level of creativity that I haven't had in years. But as it's dragged on, the novelty has worn off, and now I'm in a worse place than I was before. I've definitely picked up bad habits. I waste a lot more of my time mindlessly browsing the internet now, and I eat more junk food than I used to. I never knew how good my routines were until I no longer had them. So I know these acquired habits won't be easy habits to break. There's all this talk of long COVID, where many of the symptoms sound oddly similar to depression. Many people are in for a rude awakening when we return to normal, and yet they don't feel normal. Getting back to normal is going to be hard work. I fear my friendships will be different, or that I'll have lost touch with some people and that we'll never get our old friendships back again. I need to see this as an exciting new opportunity to create new ones with them. But right now, that too just feels like work. I'm already too busy with all the nothing I've got to get done. Look at this, 3 pages in and I still haven't covered the most exciting bit about it, which is how England is now all in on opening up, despite cases approaching the worst levels we've ever seen. In the past, had this happened, we'd have locked down again in an instant. The reason it's different this time is because the death rate is seemingly lower than before. Sure, it's always lagged behind cases by a few weeks, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. The question is, how bad is it going to get? And can our health services cope with it? Seeing the country about to open up reminds me of that moment just before I got vaccinated. Only instead of it being a needle about to go into my arm, it's the prospect of everybody in the country being exposed to the disease at the same time and with no measures in place to stop it. It probably isn't too different from how it is already, but I don't feel like there's any going back this time, so I just hope the experts have got it right. It was smart to do this before winter flu season started, and with the schools closed over summer, that'll be one less place for it to spread. But many grandparents will be caring for children, and I still feel like everybody should have had a second dose of vaccine before the great reopening. Younger people may not die so much from the disease, but they can still get hospitalised, and half of those will end up with long-term scarring or health problems as a result. Which I don't think is fair if a few more weeks of lockdown and vaccinations could have avoided that. But hey, it's done now, and this is the moment we put it all to the test. Everybody is going to be exposed to everything. No half measures. I know it's for the best, I know it has to be done at some point, but when it goes from being something in the future to being something right here, right now, it changes everything. And no matter how many times the computer says yes, to see the plan being put into action concerns me. England is leading the charge, and others will follow, but only if, with hindsight, we've got this right. The world is watching us, and we're about to become a country-sized petri dish, the figurehead for what a vaccinated population looks like post-COVID. The government obviously won't admit it, but their plan now is for everybody to get exposed to it as soon as possible. They just want to get this over and done with. And honestly, I think most of us agree with that. Enough people have been vaccinated, so let's just push on. I just wish I wasn't in England as it happens.